everyone, welcome back to Psych with Dr. DK. Tonight we're going to be talking about all the psychology when it comes to conversations about staying in the middle. In our society today, we have a really bad, I wouldn't say notion or thought process, but we just have this really bad habit of sticking to one side of the fence and only saying that our one side is correct. And we don't know how to critically think and go into the middle a lot. It takes a lot of effort, time, thought processing, but thinking, and just conversations. And I think one of the biggest things that we do is that we don't stand up for a lot of different stuff. Let me rephrase that. Sometimes what happens is that we are so afraid to tell someone what we think or what we feel on a particular topic or have a conversation because we're afraid that either it's going to turn into a fight or we are going to get kind of pummeled with words and have this debate in front of us versus being able to actually have a conversation on it. I think over the course of the last couple years, maybe about 5 years, I have seen more and more people not speaking out on things publicly, but then they will utilize social media to speak out about something. You can have a conversation with them face to face, but on social media, it's a waste of everybody's time and it's just a huge fight and argument. And I think that is dangerous. Let me kind of go a little bit deeper. Is that I think there are so many topics that we are seeing because of social media that we really firmly believe there's only one side to the story, which is not true. There is multiple sides to the story, but also there's multiple things to think through when we're making a decision that I think sometimes we just want the decision to be made for us, or we want people to look at us in a certain limelight that we are willing to risk what we believe in to stand for whatever makes us look good. So, true story. In the last couple years, I have noticed a gravitation toward likes, wanting to get likes on Facebook for myself and for other people. And I think that's natural because you're wanting to have your voice heard. And there are certain things that we won't speak up against because we're just like, oh, we just don't want to deal with that. But I think that there is this pressure of social media to not only highlight highlights, but to say the right thing the right way in the right moment and not skip a beat. And I think that there is a lot of people who struggle with that because, for me, I'm a processor. So posting something, it takes me weeks sometimes to actually emotionally get the courage to share my thought process or my heart on something. And some people are like, well, you're so good with your words though, like you don't struggle, and people don't realize how long it takes me to process. That when there is people putting pressure on me to post or say something or speak out, like I have had a few people in the last couple of years, they're like, I've been waiting for you to post about this. I've been waiting to hear your take on this. And I'm like, my take on this personally probably doesn't matter. But if you wanted to know my opinion, why didn't you talk to me? And I think that there is this crazy notion that when things happen, we all have to speak up now, or it means we don't care. And I know some people might be listening to this and being like, well, that's true. Like, it's true. If you don't post on a situation that's happening around the world right now in this moment, you are not caring enough. But they're not really caring about someone going out and doing the actions to make these things stop. Like, people would rather see you post about it than do something about it. And I think that is where it gets really dangerous when we're talking about some hot topics tonight on when it gets dangerous for when we don't move when we're supposed to. So when I'm thinking over when we start to believe something, I think through some statements or some quotes that I've heard. And there's this one quote out there by some people say it's Alexander Hamilton, and then you might be singing the song in your head from the Hamilton play. But people have said that if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing, or if you stand for everything, you stand for nothing. And honestly, I feel like that's true. So when I'm thinking through some firm beliefs that I hold, I have to ask myself, am I believing that there's only one side to this situation, or am I able to come to the middle in a conversation to try to understand the other side? And in the last couple years, I've been really challenging myself to do this because I learn more that way than when I just stand on what I believe. But also at the same time, I'm challenging what I believe to understand, is this something that I firmly believe in, or is this something that I'm wishy-washy on? Is this something I'm just standing on to get friends or likes or comments or messages on? Like, what am I really standing on and why? So one of the things is, when we speak up only when we're afraid, and or maybe only when we have pressure put on us, we're speaking up for the wrong reasons. And I hate to be that person who says it, because I firmly believe that when we're sitting here standing up for something only because we know that we want people to like us, we're actually not standing up for the things for the right reasons. And honestly, it comes off as ingenuine. It comes off as that you're only speaking up because you're afraid of somebody rejecting you, or backlash because you didn't post, or you're wanting to be accepted. You're not actually standing up because you believe in this thing. And I think that there are times when I don't know what to say. And I would, people will try to tell me that this is wrong, but I would rather not post anything than post something that is offensive. So I have, in moments in my past, I have posted stuff at the wrong time, and it actually has hurt people. So I try to post when I feel like I've been able to think through my process and what I'm feeling and thinking, and make sure it's coherent. And I read through it 100 times because I want to make sure that it doesn't hurt somebody's feelings. And when I'm rushed to post because I'm feeling like I'm being pressured, I realize that's when I see the wrong thing. So I've noticed that when people are like, I've asked a couple questions because I'm like, hey, this is not something you're, normally post about. Like, why all of a sudden are you posting? They're like, oh, because my friend said that if I didn't speak up about it, then I was complacent and that I was causing this issue and all of these things. And I was like, so do you even believe in what you're posting? And they're like, no, I'm just doing it because so-and-so told me to. And I think that is very, very dangerous, you guys, is if we're only posting things and we're not acting on things. There's so much stuff going on in the world. There are so many things that we could get involved and help with that I honestly would rather know that the organizations that I could help partner with, and partnering with those organizations versus how you feel about a situation. But I also do want to hear how you stand. There it is. I also want to understand where you stand on a situation, because you have a different perception than I do, and you might think through something differently than I do, and I want to learn. So I don't feel like there's anything wrong with posting with the intention of like learning, but also because you fully support something. But I have a problem with people who post things just to post for attention. I have a problem when I get into that notion of mindset of like, oh, I'm posting to make sure that all my friends understand I stand with them. And it's like, no, like I need to know what I believe, and I need to understand that there are particular topics that do require me to stand in the middle to understand both sides. So one of those situations is racism. We need to stand in the middle to understand, first off, it's wrong. And I have seen people on both sides where literally both sides have said, like, it's only wrong when it's against a certain person. It's only wrong when it leads to slavery. It's only wrong when. And I'm like, no, racism is always wrong. And it is always like, racism can't exist to every race. So it really hurts me to see when we regress back as a society and I see history repeating itself, because I have personally seen this throughout the pandemic. I've seen this through my entire life. I have had people literally say, because you're white, XYZ, but then my friends who it's like, I have seen my friends who are Black have things said to them that I'm like, what? Like a student I had once during COVID, he was from China, and there were people being like, go home, you're bringing COVID to us. And I was just like, oh my God, like, what is happening right now? And there are so many people on both sides that are just like Racism is only wrong when it's one person, or racism is only wrong when it's one race, or it can't happen to this race, but I can do it toward that race. It's like, no, racism is one of those middles where it's like, it's wrong. There's no exception. Like, that's it. Like, no. Slavery, it's wrong. No exceptions. I don't care who it is. I don't care if they're a murderer. You don't put them in slavery and beat the crap out of them. Like, if you murdered someone, you go to jail and you go through that sentencing process, but you don't be like, oh, well, whatever. Like, no. These are things that I am really not understanding how people get confused over these things. So for me, it's like, how do we find more middle ground with people who just don't get it? I know people who have said like racism still does not exist today. It was only in the 40s and 50s. And it's like, I'm so sorry, but no, you're wrong. Racism still exists. And I have seen it toward every single race possible. And I'm just like, I don't understand how or why, you know? And then I think about stuff where a lot of people are like, well, if it's either this or that, and that's it. And then there's typically what happens is it's not a good this or that. It's always like, well, if you stand for abortion, you can't stand for death row. And I'm like, those are two different topics with two different situations. Abortion is something that someone is saying, I need to do this because of a reason. And I don't know that person, so I can't come at you and say, you can't kill this baby, like whatever, you're just going around having sex. Like, I don't understand the situation. And that is a one-on-one conversation. But I would hope that if I was in the face of someone who was debating that decision for their life, that I can say like, I can help in a way that's tangible for you and your child, versus just being like, I'm going to shame you, I'm going to tell you you're going to hell, and I'm going to blah, 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 whatever. Like, abortion is a hot topic, and it's a lot of topics people won't talk about, but it's also, there's that middle where it's kind of like, I can understand why you think that is your only way out. Okay. But there are other ways, you know? And that's something where it's case by case, where I have to sit, like, I can't come attack somebody because they made that decision. I need to love that person where they're at, because there's more to the situation going on outside of them wanting to do what they're going to do. You know, now murder, on the other hand, with death row, like, these are people, like, most of the time, though, let me say this, I looked it up around, excuse me, I'm like burping, whatever, everybody. This is alive. It's not really, but it is. With murder, there are people who, I looked up the statistic of how many people on death row were actually considered innocent or found to be innocent, and they said it's about 4%. But there are a lot of people who are on death row that it's like, yeah, no, you should kill this person because of the fact that they are killing people, and they're not going to stop because there's something psychological going on with their minds. Like, this is literally, like, I'm getting really passionate. I'm really sorry, but this topic is hard, but I want to address it. When someone is deciding to murder people, and they are mass murderers, and they are known for what they've done, like, you don't know the case story where it's like they get joy out of doing what they did. That kind of a person doesn't need to be around other people. And when you're saying that abortion is the same thing as executing them on death row, that's two different things. That's two different topics, and it's two different topics on two different days with looking at it case by case. I don't believe that someone who sold weed should get death row. That makes no sense to me. Like, and I've heard people say that. There are notorious people out there they're murderers, they're sexual abusers, they're people who find joy and fulfillment out of hurting other people, that it's like, they gotta go, you know? And like, I don't mean to, just anyway, like, it's just a lot. And that is a conversation that I feel like a lot of people try to push it together. The same way that they try to put prostitution and porn and sex trafficking victims together, where they're just like, well, you can't stand for porn and then stand against prostitution and then stand against human trafficking. And I'm like, we need to stand against all of it, because prostitution can lead to someone being sold into sex trafficking and porn, and there are a lot of people who get hurt because of these things. And some people try to say, oh, no, they're separate. Like, if I watch porn, it's totally fine. Like, no one's getting hurt and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, like, this is a topic where watching, you don't know what's happening in this person's life, and you're willing to partake in this particular thing that is hurting other people, even if it's not the person you're watching on screen. There are other people who have been sold into sex slavery. There are children who have been sold into sex slavery and put into the porn industry and all of these things, and they're on the black market. And when you stand for something like that and you say, oh, it's not the same thing, like, there is a middle ground that we have to come to understand why there is a bigger issue. Now, there's another one where I have heard people talk back and forth about, and it's the Holocaust. And I bring that up, and people might be like, Denisha, that has nothing to do with like standing in the middle on a conversation. That thing was wrong. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But there are people out there who have tried to justify the Nazi stance. And it's interesting to me, because they've tried to justify this so much that they were just like, well, how do we know that Hitler wasn't wrong? Or and even like, most people get that that's not good what he did. I mean, that was 6 million Jews were killed. The estimated number was actually 11 million, including everyone who was non-Jew, and who were killed because of either standing against Hitler or defiance of the law, and they were put in jail. And there's this thing that happened that a lot of people tended to get into this, I'm either on this side or that side. And the reason I bring this up is because I'm on this side or that side mentality that ended up being like a bandwagon for people. And what a lot of people did was they were like, oh, this dude is saying that, you know, the Jews have this, and this disease, and they're going to give it to us. Of course, lock them away. Like, why would they be in our population? And then there were people who started to stand against Hitler, and there were people who kept bouncing between the two sides. And basically what they were doing was they were bouncing between the two sides of whoever was going to like them and get them into where they wanted to be. It was not that they were actually standing for anything. And that's kind of where I think that phrase comes back of like, when you stand for everything, you stand for nothing, because you're just flipping sides, hoping that someone will see you, and you're just getting those likes and those follows and those people behind you. That it's just, I don't even know, because it baffles me. I think when I'm thinking about the situation of the Holocaust, there were a lot of people within the military and stuff like that when it came to, it was called Operation Valkyrie. And there were people who were like, okay, we need to get Hitler out. We're starting to understand what he's doing. This is not good. This is not what we were about. And they were trying to fight against Hitler, and they were planning an assassination. And there were also people who were like, oh yeah, we're going to stand with you and da-da-da-da. And then when they realized it wasn't working, they were just like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and stand back on the Hitler side, because I think it's okay, because I need to stand on the side that's not going to get me killed. And it actually ended up getting 7,000 people killed because they stood against Hitler. And there was also people who were killed who kept flipping back and forth. And it's just, to me, I'm just like, well, you kind of got what you got and got. Like, you're not standing, you died not standing for anything. And it kind of makes me come to this thought process is there is a lot of the times that we join a bandwagon and we don't actually stand for anything, and we're unwilling to stand in the middle to understand somebody else's thought process. And I think it's really dangerous when we do that. First off, we're not learning people. We're not learning why someone believes what they believe. And we're losing out on opportunities to speak in. Now, when we're speaking into something, we're not coming in with a hammer. When we're speaking into something, we're not going to come in and we're not going to be like, well, you're wrong and this is why you're wrong, but more of asking questions like, okay, I want to understand your thought process. And I've done this with a few friends where I'm like, okay, can you tell me why you believe abortion is okay? Like, why would it work? Why would it be an option? And I'm starting to hear a shift toward abortion is okay because it's better than the kid being in foster homes. And that breaks my heart, because it's just kind of like, or we can have a conversation about why that may not be an option, and that maybe the person who's deciding to keep their kid, they're going to be a good parent. Like, let's talk about that. Like we automatically jump to or assume the worst case scenario. And so by sitting with different people, I'm understanding why they believe what they believe. And it was interesting. There was one person I was talking to a couple years ago, and he firmly believed that he did not need to read laws or anything that was put in, like the booklets of what was being put into law in the United States. He's like, I just need a summary of it. And I was like, okay. So, and he was younger, and I said, I just want to challenge you a little bit. And I said, I don't want to make you mad, but I want to challenge you a little bit, because I'm hearing what you're saying, and what you're saying is you just don't have time to read everything and you want someone to give you a summary. But what if I were to tell you that in 150 pages, I did not put that on the summary? And he's like, well, why wouldn't you put that on the summary? I said, because the summary is a page. So what I'm going to do is bullet point major things, but I could also slip in some things that are not great that I don't want you to see, because I want to make you vote for what I want blindly. And he got like this person got really mad, because he was just like, why would you deceive me like that? And I said, that's just how it works. If you're asking me to give you a summary, I'm only going to pull out what I want you to see. I said, it's like writing a paper. And he was just like, oh my gosh. I said, I know it takes time to read a 150-page document, but I would rather us sit in the middle to say like, hey, let's take our time to read through this, than to have you blindsided or to have me blindsided. And it kind of became that middle conversation where he's just like, okay, so what do you believe on this, and this? And so we were talking about it, and I was like, this is what I believe. This is why I stand on what I stand on. And he's like, well, I don't stand on those things. And I'm like, I'm not asking you to. But at the same time, too, we were able to have a really good conversation. And both of us met each other in the middle, where we were both critically thinking, and we were understanding where the other person came from. And we were able to understand each other better. And both of us had respect for each other a lot more. We still didn't walk away from the conversation being like, yeah, I totally changed my mind, and both of us agree. But he had said something, and it was to the effect of like, well, I just want to stand wherever everybody else stands. And you're never going to stand there, because everyone believes everything different. And there's this thing called the bandwagon effect. And there's some times where it's a cognitive bias that we believe that other people think the way that we do, and that they behave the way that we do, and so what we do is okay. And so there's a lot of people who live out there who is like, oh, well, everybody else is stealing, so I can steal too. And it's like, well, no, not everybody is stealing. Small group of people steal, but not everyone is stealing. And they're just like, oh, totally okay, it's fine, like whatever. And I'm thinking like, this happens on Facebook too, is like there's this bandwagon effect that happens, is that once we start seeing people post things, we're like, oh, we better post so people like us and like our stuff, so that way they see this bandwagon. And the other reason I think people do this is fear of rejection, and they fear people not liking them, or fear the conversation. I hear a lot of people say all of the time, they're just like, I stopped posting about this, or I started posting about this because I didn't want to hear about it from a so-and-so. And I'm like, stop right there. Like, if that is the only reason why you post things is to get the attention of other people, you're posting because you're wanting to be validated, and you're posting because you want to be wanted. And you are just posting to post. You're not actually posting to care about something. And I think that that's really, really bad. And I want to kind of address why that's a bad thing. People won't respect you when you're doing that. People do see that it's ingenuine. And if you're only standing up for things because you know people are going to like you for it, you're going to lose respect from people like that. Like, people are just like, nope. There's going to be times when you are on sides of history where you have to make a decision to stand with one side and not stand with the other. But there are conversations we can have to stand in the middle. And I would hope that we would say, hey, history has shown these things. History has shown killing innocent people is not okay. We should not do that. I should not look at someone and say, because your race, because your gender, because the way you look, I'm going to beat you and treat you like dirt. But for some reason, we do those things. And it's sickening and it sucks because it's just like a lot of people will be like, I never learned that in history. And I'm like, no, you just didn't pay attention in class. Like, let me call you out for a minute. Because guess what? I thought I didn't go through that in history, and I've found history tests that I took. I was like, wow, I don't remember taking that. And so when we're sitting on this side, like, we need to understand that things like what's happening in Ukraine right now, things that, yes, there's a ton of things that happen over there. There's always been wars. There's always been these things. This stuff is wrong. And yet so many people are just like, well, it sucks for me because gas prices are going up. It's like, yeah, it does suck that gas prices are going up. It really, really does. But I know people in Ukraine. I know people in Russia. And I think my heart just kind of like, when you see people standing together when these things happen, and people who are in Russia have said, like, we don't agree with this. Like, this is not something we wanted. This is not something we want. This is an individual deciding this. We are against this, and we're trying to help our friends in Ukraine. And then I have friends in Ukraine being like, we don't hate people in Russia. We understand that this isn't them. We are heartbroken. We're destroyed, and like physically, emotionally, and physically, just their lives are just destroyed. And you think, like, if someone who is in a war zone like that they could look at the person across that line, across that race, and they can look at you and say, you know what? I know that this isn't you. Wow. Like, just because, like, they're not associating what's happening toward every single person in the other country, Like, they're looking at the other person and being like, hey, I know you didn't want this. I didn't want it either. And we're going to be like, I care for you as a human being. And I think that's the point we need to get to for everything. Like, hey, you don't believe the same things that I do. I want to sit down and I want to get to know you. I want to know why you're passionate about this. And I might not know about it. I might know about it, but you give me a different take. And I want to understand why this matters to you and what I can do to help. And it's really, really hard because I think so many of us decide not to even try to sit in the middle with people. We just are kind of like, I'm not even going to get into it with you. I'm not going to get into it with anybody. I don't care. I'm out. And I think that that's so bad because we forget to learn. So if we're able to sit in the middle, if we're able to come into the middle, even though society might say, like, you have to stick on one side or the other, you're either, I've heard people say this, like, you're either for Russia or you're against Ukraine, or vice versa. Like, you can't be for both. And it's like, I'm not for people starting wars. Wars happen, though. I'm not for racism. Racism still happens. I'm not for sex slavery, but it still happens. So what do I do in the middle? And in the middle, I say, hey, this is what we can do. And not just me, I'm just saying in general. Like, we can stand in the middle and say, what can we do to stop this thing? And that is speaking out. But speaking out for the right reasons, and then finding organizations that we can partner with that is doing the mission work, or do the mission work with ourselves, like connect with them and say, like, how can I help physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially, all of the illies things, like whatever, like, let's stand in and help. And I think, again, like, if we forget that there's a middle ground where it's like, every moment racism happens, it's wrong. Every moment sex slavery happens, it's wrong. Every time someone goes and gets an abortion, it is wrong. But how do I sit with that person and say, I see you more than I see the issue? And then even with people who are racist, or people who are in the industry of selling people, or in the industry of letting people be taken advantage of. If I could sit with the victim and say, I see you, I'm going to be able to hear their story and know how to help. So I want to encourage you, first off, don't post just to post. Don't post because you're feeling pressured from everybody. Don't post because you're trying to get attention. If you stand for everything, you're going to stand for nothing, all at the same time. And if you're only talking about stuff because you want people to like yourself on Facebook or Instagram, but you're not actually going out and doing and helping and trying to make a difference, Facebook and Instagram mean nothing. Nothing. What means more is for us to get out there and do and be a part of the change. I would honestly rather see people do the change than share a Instagram post about what they think about it. I would rather see them use their hands and feet to help the homeless than them posting, hey, here's a statistic about homelessness, and then they just don't care. Like, they're not actually going out and doing. And that's where I kind of feel called out because, I don't always do that either. And it's hard because there's so many causes. There's so many things. There's so many. I just kicked my camera so it shook. Was not an earthquake. That was me kicking the camera. Anyways, there are so many of us where we sit back and we speak out on a lot of things, but we don't do enough. And we're like, we should help the homeless. And then we drive by someone and we're like, drug addict. And you put yourself there instead of being like, hey, here's food, here's water, here's this, here's that, here's a hotel where you can stay, here's a voucher from the city. Here, let me help you with this. I remember, short story, I was speaking out against foster care, not against foster care, but let me rephrase that. I was speaking out of what happens for people to get in foster care. And I remember somebody messaged me and they said, you keep sharing about these things, but what are you doing to help them, those kids in foster homes? And I was like, my response back was, I'm raising my 3 siblings who I have guardianship of through the foster care system. And I was really hurt because I was trying to bring awareness to it. But that kind of always has stuck with me to where it's like I always ask that question now where I'm posting something. I'm like, what am I doing to help with this? Am I just posting to post to get likes, or am I doing something to make a difference? And I would hope that we would choose to make the difference versus getting the like. So that's what I have for you guys tonight. I don't know. That's kind of been on my heart for a little bit. And it's a weird thing because it can be very political, I feel like, but also at the same time, it's not. But you guys, I want us to start having conversations in the middle. First and foremost, we are people who need to talk through things. And I don't want you to stand on the sidelines and be like, it's that person's fault or that person's fault or F you. And there's just all this stuff where it's just kind of like, there are some things that are just blanket statement, like that is wrong. We are not doing that. Let's fight against it. And then there's stuff where we kind of have to come into the middle and be like, I need to hear your side on this to why, so I can understand you better. And then there's things that I need to come into the middle to understand so I could do better in helping and getting out there and doing things to make a difference. So I hope you hear that. I don't know if this all makes sense, but we'll see. Enjoy, and I'll see you guys next week.